This is the story about the Congress Mine. This old mine is located just on the outskirts of the town of Congress, Arizona, which is just a short drive north of the town of Wickenburg. It was back in the 1860s that prospectors showed up in an area known as Date Creek. It was rumored that the Spaniards had been in this area much earlier and traces of gold had been found. Even though these prospectors found some gold, it would be another 20-odd years before any kind of serious prospecting would take place. Then in 1870, a prospector by the name of Dennis May found a small vein of gold mineralization. This claim became known as the Date Creek Lode. However, it still took another 14-odd years before any mining actually got going on this deposit. Part of the reason for the length of time to get things going was the remoteness of this area along with the cost. Between 1880 and 1884, Dennis staked another 2 claims to prospect. These were the Niagara and the Congress. Eventually, all these claims were grouped to form the Congress Mine. Then in 1887, after almost 17 years of prospecting this claim, it is said that Dennis sold the claim for $30,000. The man who bought the claims was a man named Joseph Reynolds, sometimes referred to as Diamond Joe. Joseph Reynolds had the money to put this mine into operation. He was the owner of the Diamond Joe Line, which was a transportation company that operated steamboats and barges on the Mississippi River. Joseph started the Congress Gold Company and built a stamp mill close to the mine and then proceeded to start mining. The mine ran for a time until 1891 when Joseph died of pneumonia. Being as Joseph had no family aside from a wife, he had left a portion of the mine to a friend named Frank Murphy, who had helped him as a broker. Of course, this Frank Murphy fellow wasn't overly interested in having a gold mine at the time, as he was kind of involved with building a short-haul railroad from Ash Fork on the Santa Fe main line, so he sold the mine to a group of miners who were from the Tombstone area. Now at this time, the silver rush at Tombstone had gone bust, so these new mine owners moved their workers up to the Congress Mine, where they added extra stamps to the mill as well as installing cyanide vats. By 1900, the Congress Mine consisted of about 30 separate mining claims. Its main shaft had reached a depth of 2,700 feet, which was the deepest mine shaft in Arizona at that time. The mine had almost 400 miners on the payroll, and by the end of the first year, the mine had produced $5 million of gold. This was at a time when gold was just a mere $20 an ounce. Now, remember that Frank Murphy fellow who was involved with this mine? Anyways, after the railroad that Frank was involved in got built, he bought back into the Congress Mine with another company named the Development Company of America, and this company was involved in buying and developing properties. By this time, the Congress Mine was a going concern, and in 1901, President William McKinley even stopped by to tour this mine. Also touring the mine with the president was none other than Nathan Oakes Murphy, who was the Arizona governor at that time. Now, this Nathan Murphy just so happened to be the brother of, you guessed it, Frank Murphy. Now, you can see how gold mining companies back then were much like the big tech and pharma companies are today. It's like George Carlin used to say, it's one big club and you and I ain't in it. Then, like a lot of old mines back in the day, in 1902 there were labor issues, mostly about pay. The miners were threatening to join up with a union, and so the company brought in some cheap Mexican workers. However, during this time, the Arizona government stepped in and introduced the 8-hour day for miners. Then later that same year, another group of investors who had a claim close to the Congress claims found gold and started up a mine called the Senate Mine. This caused quite a bit of a ruckus because these claims had been dismissed by some of the Congress Mine's geologists as not having any gold values. So at this time, the Congress Mine started a big staking rush to acquire more claims. This staking rush proved to be quite profitable because new gold deposits were found. By 1905, the main shaft had reached a depth of 4,000 feet. There were some good high-grade veins of gold along the way, and by 1906, newer high-grade veins were discovered. This prompted the mine owners to spend more money to upgrade the operation, and you can pretty much tell what would happen after that. After spending a pile of cash on more hoists and more stamps for the mill along with other upgrades, well, surprise, surprise, suddenly the grades at the lower depths started to get a bit leaner. Like an old miner friend of mine once said, going deep is an uphill battle. And by 1910, after finding high-grade gold ores to meager and hard-to-process ores, the mine running low on cash, it was decided that there would be no more dividends for shareholders, and by 1911, the mine was shut down. Frank Murphy's Development Company of America was unable to cover the payment on bonds, and by 1912, the mine was basically bankrupt. However, Frank Murphy and his attorney bought the bankrupt mine from the courts, and so there was optimism in the town that maybe, just maybe, the mine would start back up. But maybes never come, and Frank and his attorney started to sell off some of the assets of the mine. There were reports that the mine would start up, but these reports, of course, turned out to be false, and slowly the people started to move on to other boom towns. Then in 1917, Frank Murphy died, and the estate sold off all the remaining interests in the mine. Not only was the mine sold, but also the mill and the short-haul railroad. Then in the 1930s, for a very brief time, the mine started back up as the price of gold increased. But this too was short-lived, and from that time on, the mine became known by the locals as Old Congress. In the end, the Old Congress mine is said to have produced around $8 million worth of gold. This was all during a time when gold prices hovered around the $20 mark. You can still go out to the old mine site of the Congress mine today, however you will not get past the gate. There is a sign that says there is a 24-hour guard on duty and everything is locked up pretty tight. You can see a bit of some tailing dumps and an old ore bin in the distance. It is located pretty much at the end of the Ghost Town Road, just a few miles out from the town of Congress. You can also go to the old Pioneer Cemetery, as it is just a short ways off away from the mine site. Well, that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this short story about the Old Congress mine. Please like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you more old lost mine stories.